The Week 15 preview episode of the Bears Talk Underground is brought to you by MyBookie. Sure, watching football is fun, but it's a lot more entertaining when you have some action on the games. Guys, you've heard me talking about this all season, and some of you are still on the sidelines. Whether you're an expert or a rookie, you should be betting at MyBookie. That should be a jingle or something. Pick 3 games to win, and if you hit all 3, you could turn $100 into $600 if you do a parlay. There's so much to bet on. College football, college basketball. Bowl season starts this weekend on the 15th. The NBA, NFL, NHL, custom props, even esports. I don't know how you bet on esports, but hey, MyBookie can help you out with that. You name it, they got it. It is the one bet I know you'll be happy with all year. Sign up this week, and MyBookie will give you a 50% deposit bonus to jumpstart your bankroll. It's a great way to bank even more money when you win, because you know you're going to win, because you're all smart enough to be betting. And that's, people who bet and gamble don't lose money at all. That's right. Also, make sure to follow at BetMyBookie on Twitter. They personally respond to every mention and DM, not to mention that they've given away more than $10,000 in free money to their followers this football season. You'll also be the first to know when new odds and props are posted. So don't miss out on a great weekend to bet. Like I said, bowl games, you got college basketball, Bears-Packers on Sunday. Why wouldn't you want to put a little money down on that? Log on to MyBookie right now and use the promo code BEARS25 to get your 50% deposit bonus. That's promo code BEARS25. MyBookie, you play, you win, you get paid. This week on the Bears Talk Underground. Of our beloved's 4 losses in 2018, the one they suffered in Week 1 to Green Bay stung the worst and still stings to this day. But Sunday brings a chance to erase those bitter feelings by downing the Packers at Soldier Field and claiming our first division title since 2010. Can the Bears right that wrong, or will revenge cloud their vision? Evan Weston from ACME Packing Co joins us for the Week 15 preview episode of the Bears Talk Underground. It's round 2 for Bears-Packers, and I've been talking about this one for a while now, and we as Bear fans collectively, we want this one bad. What's going on, everybody? Larry D back for the Week 15 preview episode of the Bears Talk Underground. Our good friend Evan Western from SB Nation's ACME Packing Company will be joining us here in just a few moments to help preview this game. And believe me, it is a much different conversation than the one that we had prior to Week 1. I mean, Evan's not a cocky guy or anything like that. It's one of the reasons I enjoy talking to him. I don't run into too many non-cocky Packer fans in my daily life, but living in a region where it's here in Iowa, it's kind of a divided community between the Bears and the Packer fan bases and such. But like I said, I don't run into too many Packer fans that don't love rubbing it in my face every time. Like strangers out in public. I'm wearing a Bears t-shirt or a Bears hat or something like that. How about them Bears on Sunday? That kind of thing. It's like, great. Wonderful. Good for you. It's like, I'm not going to waste my energy with this, but still in conversely, I've never been that guy, like on the rare occasion where the Bears would get one over on Green Bay. I don't seek out any Packer fan I can get my hands on and like, what about that on Thanksgiving night? Aaron Rodgers, 4 shots from the 10, couldn't pull it off. I was never that guy. So anyway, Evan's not that guy, which is why I enjoy talking to him and why I like him as a person, despite the fact that he is a supporter of the team that was born from Satan's anus. So, that's just how I feel. But the air of the conversation, the tone of the conversation was much different Week 1. Obviously very optimistic about the return of Aaron Rodgers and, what the Packers were able to do in the offseason. Gutekunst was the new general manager, not afraid to go out and add some pieces. They went out and got Jimmy Graham. They focused much on the secondary. That was kind of an Achilles heel for them last year. And, they came back and won that game Week 1, which kind of led a lot of people to believe early on anyway that it was just going to be more of the same. Even though the Bears have this improved roster, they're still not ready yet. And here we are 14 weeks later, and who would have thought the complete reversal of the roles that we're seeing right now? You hear me mention it to Evan at one point during the conversation that the roles have been reversed here. here, instead of this late game of the season, where for the most part, for a very long time, it's been the Packers that were the playoff bound team, and the Bears that were looking to ruin the Packers' playoff hopes in one way or another. Whether we're trying to, cost them a game so they don't get home field advantage or, what have you. But we're trying to play spoiler in some way or another because our season, for the most part, is over. And here in this instance, it's pretty much the other way around. That there is still a ray of light for the Packers. They have to win out, which is going to be extremely difficult. But considering they have to come to Chicago on Sunday, where one team out of 7 has had any kind of success this year, 6-1 at home this year. How awesome is that? But it's just not very likely. The Bears are the superior team on paper and on tape right now. That we're just better than Green Bay is, and we're in unfamiliar territory right now as far as the history of this rivalry is concerned. So it was a very different conversation that we're having. Instead of talking about all the things that have gotten Green Bay to this point that were positive, it's been the other way around. Injuries, the Mike McCarthy firing, and what's not been working on offense, and play calling, this, that, and the other. A very different conversation that we had with each other this time. And, you'll even hear me say at the end, well, I hope they get it fixed, because it hasn't happened, at least not in my time. Maybe a year here, a year there, that kind of thing. But it hasn't in my lifetime occurred where the Bears and the Packers have been good at the same time, where the Bears and the Packers are the ones that are going for supremacy in the NFC North and or NFC Central for the old school black and blue division and everything like that. I guess that's the only way the universe can handle it right now, is if the Bears are good, Green Bay has to be bad, and vice versa. It's very rarely ever happened that both teams were at the top of the division legitimately, that both teams were going to make the playoffs. It happened in 2010, and that's the only time that I can think of that we both made the playoffs at the same time. I think maybe it happened again in 2001, but that's about it. So, I mean, obviously the team that the Bears had back in the 80s when Ditka was the coach and we were in the playoffs and the Super Bowl contention every year from 84 until 88, the Green Bay was the butthole of the NFL. They were terrible during those years. So it's never really been the norm for both teams to be good. So it's I'm rooting for Green Bay to right the ship, because this is the greatest rivalry in football. It's the longest standing rivalry, the most games played, that kind of thing. And I think it's time for there to be a legitimate rivalry where these teams are going back and forth year after year, splitting victories or coming down to the wire, like legitimate high-level football being played between these teams, as opposed to one shellacking the other year after year because the Bears are better than the Packers this year, or the Packers are better than the Bears this year, and vice versa. So, as a fan of the Bears, I hope that we continue to beat the unholy piss out of Green Bay and dominate the series, and hell, get the series lead back, because I think we're down 3 games thanks to the Week 1 loss in the overall rivalry. It's but as a football fan and someone who appreciates the game as much as I do, I would love it if Green Bay comes back next year and we're both battling it out all season long, kind of like the Chiefs and the Chargers have been banging it out all season long this year. Because I have been having a bout with sinus problems the last few days. I came home and took some sinus meds and passed out and missed the best Thursday night game of the year tonight, waking up to hear that the Chargers came back at the last second to win that game against Kansas City. So I missed out on a hell of a game, apparently. But I would like to see games like that between the Bears and the Packers. So edge of your seat, the one team coming triumphant in the end, but both teams could have won, kind of thing. So anyway, real quick, we got some news and notes to get through before we get to our talk with Evan Western. Here's an article I read earlier today titled Louis Riddick predicts the Bears to represent NFC in the Super Bowl. Louis Riddick, of course, ESPN on-air personality, a former NFL executive, and was on the Waddle and Sylvie show on ESPN in 1000 in Chicago. And he said, I quote, I love everything about how this team is playing. I think they're going to shock the hell out of some people who just refuse to believe Mitch will ever be able to play good enough. They refuse to believe that the Bears, that they'll be able to have another turnover differential in their favor the way it is, and they don't think this is sustainable. I happen to believe that it is. So he think the Bears right now have the formula for success to make a deep playoff run, and even goes on to say, once they get in there, I don't care if they're playing in Chicago or not. If they play a home game, they'll win that playoff game. If they have to go on the road to New Orleans, I know that would be a hell of a place to have to go and win and go to the Super Bowl. To go to L.A. would be a tough place to go and tough place to win to go to the Super Bowl. But don't be shocked if they get to the Super Bowl. Don't be shocked. So there you go. I think Louis Riddick was actually one of the very first endorsers of the Bears actually being a legitimate team this year, and there he is basically doubling down on his stance now that it's getting to the nitty-gritty, and the Bears had this tremendous showing on national TV against the LA Rams, who were supposed to kind of steamroll through us on national TV last Sunday. So it's great to hear that kind of thing, that there are believers out there, and true believers, who think that the Bears have a legitimate shot, whether we're playing in Chicago, in L.A., New Orleans, or whatever. He thinks the Bears have a legit shot to make it to Atlanta and represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. Speaking of the Rams and the Raiders are both listed as home teams for international games next year. Of course, the Bears are playing the AFC West next year, and we would be on the road to the Raiders. The Bears are on the road to the NFC West finisher this year, so the same place opponents, which right now would be the Saints and the Rams because they're both in first place, would be, so that we would be on the road to the Rams and the Raiders next year. And so the Bears could be playing in Mexico City. We could be going overseas to London. It's a possibility. And when I saw that, my first thought was, I don't want Bears-Raiders to be in London. I don't want Bears-Raiders to be in Mexico City or anything like that, because I want to see how Oakland will receive Khalil Mack when he returns to Oakland. Will they boo him as a traitor and a deserter or anything like that? Will they embrace him and applaud him for the 4 years that he was there and the stud, the animal that he was, Defensive Player of the Year, helped get them to the playoffs in 2016 and whatnot? I want to see what the reception is going to be like when Khalil Mack comes walking back into his old stomping grounds in Oakland. So I'm very curious to see how that will turn out. So just for that reason, I hope that the Oakland game is in Oakland, because hell, actually right now, I don't know if the Raiders know that they're going to be playing in Oakland next year. There's some back and forth going on about how they might be playing their home games in San Antonio or Reno or something like that next year because of the lease that they have in the Oakland Coliseum, and their stadium won't be ready in Vegas until 2020. So who knows where the Bears are going to play the Raiders next year. I just hope it's in Oakland so Khalil Mack can come back to Oakland, and I want to see what kind of reception he's going to get next year. And then finally, we got some injuries to talk about, and an unfortunate one for one of the healthiest teams in football. Bryce Callahan, who left the Bear game early on Sunday night with a foot injury, has been declared out for the year. He's been placed on IR today, or yesterday, I should say, with a broken foot. So he is done for 2018. He was having a monster year as our nickel corner this season, and that's going to hurt going forward. I think that if Sherrick McManus can repeat what he did against the Rams on Sunday, it's a blow, but one that we can absorb. Fortunately for us, the Bears have have some decent depth at the cornerback or defensive back position right now, but that one sucks. Losing Callahan was no bueno, so it's terrible that we're going to lose him this year. But I think that if Sherrick McManus can step up the way he did against the Rams, I think that we'll definitely be okay. It sucks that Bryce won't be in there, though, and it was a contract year for him, so we'll see how this affects his free agent status and who he ends up going to. Hopefully he stays home, but to see how this affects him, because that is actually one of the knocks on Callahan is that he's often hurt. Little banged up injuries here, a hamstring there, something like that. But for the most part, he hasn't played a 16-game season in his short NFL career. And then to finish off the injury report, we Bear fans had a nice little scare yesterday on Wednesday when Allen Robinson showed up as not participating in practice with a hip injury. Matt Nagy told the press today that it was just a precaution, basically a maintenance day, as they like to call it, or as Lovey used to call it, a Veterans Day off. And but he was back in practice today, limited with the hip injury, and there are no worries, concerns about him not playing on Sunday against Green Bay. Speaking of Green Bay, they, on the other hand, have a boatload of issues going on. Bashad Breeland, groin injury, has not practiced yet this week on Wednesday or Thursday. Brian Bulaga, you'll hear Evan talk about him, yet to practice this week with a knee injury, did not play last week against the Falcons. Kenny Clark has been out all week with a elbow injury. He has not been playing, and Evan does not like the prospect of what could happen if Kenny Clark doesn't play on Sunday. Randall Cobb was limited yesterday with a hamstring injury, was full participation today. Jimmy Graham with knee and thumb injuries did not practice yesterday, was limited today. Clay Matthews, my least favorite Packer, probably of all time, has been limited this week with an ankle injury. They still have Rodgers on the injury list with that knee injury. He has been full participation, so no worries there. How do you say that? Equanimous? Yeah, Equanimous St. Brown, elbow injury, has been full participation this week. And guard Lane Taylor with a foot injury, probably was out one of the other, because he said there were 3 starters that were out last week against the Falcons. Limited with a foot injury on Wednesday, full participation today, so it looks like he will be back in the lineup. But those 2 linemen that we talked about earlier, Brian Bulaga, Kenny Clark, Bulaga being the starting right tackle, did not play last week against the Falcons. It's not looking good right now. And Kenny Clark with an elbow injury, not yet practicing this week. He is you'll hear Evan say, if Kenny Clark doesn't play, then we will have none of our day one starters on the defensive line playing against the Bears on Sunday. So as a Bear fan, yay for that. So hopefully that sticks through. But anyway, so there's your injury report. We have one guy on the injury report, and he was limited in practice today and will most likely play on Sunday unless he suffers some kind of setback or an actual injury in practice tomorrow on Friday. So once again, heading into a Week 15 matchup with one guy on the injured list who was practicing. So a night and day scenario from where the Bears were a year ago at this time, where we also had a dozen people on injured reserve and about 8 people on the injury list banged up with certain ailments here and there. So just an unbelievable job. We finally got some luck as far as injuries are concerned, but also what the hell are those trainers doing? What is that training staff, that strength and conditioning coach staff doing that John Fox and his guys were not? Because John Fox brought in his own guys last year. For the 3 years that he was in Chicago, he had his own strength and conditioning team with him that he probably brought with him from Denver. I don't know if they didn't adjust for elevation because they're on sea level now as opposed to being way up in the mountains before or anything like that. But whatever formula those guys are putting together did not work because we sucked as far as keeping players healthy the last few years. So kudos to that training staff, the strength and conditioning staff, because we've had a lot more healthy Bears into the season than we've had in quite some time. We had fairly decent luck with injuries when Lovey was the coach. It took a turn when Trestman and Fox were in town. But now that Nagy is here and they bring in this brand new training staff, the tides have turned for sure. We get one guy on the injury list, in week 15, one guy on the injury list, and he's more than likely going to play on Sunday. So what a fantastic job those guys have been doing. So anyway, that is going to do it for the news and notes. Let's go ahead and bring in our good friend, Evan Western from ACME Packing Company and SB Nation to help us preview this all-important game between the Bears and the Packers for Week 15. So week 15 is here, and it's Bears-Packers 2. There is a lot to talk about with this game, and of course, here to help us get through all of this and talk about past, present, future of our two franchises here, our good friend from ACME Packing Company, Evan Western. What's going on, man?
Oh, it's been a quiet, uneventful season in Titletown, I tell you.
Yeah, it's been quiet, nothing too major going on. A few cosmetic changes here and there, and let's talk about these things, Evan. First of all, let's get week one out of the way. Let's talk about something you'll actually probably enjoy talking about.
That was fun.
Yeah, I bet it was. It happened again. Rodgers worked his magic and he beat us. And as a football fan, there's no denying how awesome he was in the second half. From the beating that he took in the first half, I mean, bad enough that Collinsworth and Michaels on the Sunday Night Football team were talking about if the Bears score on the opening drive, because they started the second half with the football, does McCarthy even put Rodgers back out there? You're down 24-0. He's hobbling, onto the field and all that kind of stuff. Do you even put him out there to 60, not even half an hour later, Rodgers throwing touchdown passes, and I want to put a bullet in my mouth listening to, and it has nothing to do with Rodgers coming back and doing what Rodgers does, because that part, believe it or not, was not all that surprising. He is one of the greatest. This is what he does, and he especially likes to do it to the Bears. That part was actually not that hard to deal with. It just happens. The part that I could not handle, and I even sent you a message the night after the game about this, was I could not handle Michaels and Collinsworth over-exaggerating. It was amazing watching them over-exaggerate even something great that Rodgers did that night by overblowing what actually happened to him in the game, or what he was putting himself through in the second half to get the Packers the victory.
Yeah, I mean, I always go back to that game-winning touchdown to Randall Cobb, and that was, I mean, it was a nice throw over the middle to get Cobb in a kind of contested catch situation, but that was 10, 15 yards downfield. Cobb did the rest of that on his own.
Yeah.
And this also was a couple of plays after Rodgers should have been picked off and hit one of the Bears D-backs right in the numbers. And
Kyle Fuller.
That's right. It was Fuller. And then, just straight up drops it. So it's, I hear you there. And I feel like Michaels and Collinsworth are some of the worst defenders when it comes to, like you said, over-exaggerating the quarterback's contributions, and maybe not giving credit where credit's due to some of the other players on the field.
Yeah, I mean, it just went from he got hurt, had to come out of the game. He walked off the field under his own power. They put him on the cart and drove him into the locker room. But to listen to Michaels and Collinsworth tell it, they had to sew his lead back on right there on the field, that they had the ambulance come onto the field and drive him off of it. And then Collinsworth was my favorite in the second half. And it's like, and I didn't even care if this sounded like sour grapes when I did the review show. It just drove me so crazy. It's like, what he did was awesome. And somehow you guys are making this mythical event having taken place, because Collinsworth kept saying that Rodgers couldn't even stand on his own, doesn't even have the power to stand on his own, and he's out there throwing touchdown passes. Like, what are you talking about? He made it sound like Rodgers is out there with a crutch under his left arm and he's slinging touchdown passes with his right. It's like, that's what he would have you believe, like it was a old Byron Leftwich situation where his offensive linemen were carrying him from one huddle 30 yards down the field to the next or something. It's like, to me, he was almost ruining it by overblowing the way that he did. I mean, I know you probably didn't care at the time because he was scoring touchdowns and winning you a football game. It's just like, we're losing the game, and that sucks. The only thing that's making it worse is making it sound like it was 1,000 times bigger and more outlandish than it was. It almost diminished what actually happened for me.
Yeah, I think for us it was, when Rodgers went down initially, it was the shock of, oh God, we just, we got him back. now, we're excited about this season. We got a bunch of changes. We got a bunch of new faces, and we got a new defensive coordinator and everything. And you're telling me that Rodgers is, tears his ACL in the first half of the season, and he's going to be out for the rest of the year, and we gotta play the rest of the year with frickin' Deshaun Kaiser. Like that was the mindset of Packers fans for an hour and change,
right?
Between the time that he left the field and when he came back out for the second half, and I swear to you, everyone was convinced that his ACL was gone and he was done for the year. Mm-hmm. And so to have him come back at all was nuts. To have McCarthy, who I think the second half of that game was the best football he's called all season, because he was limited by what Rodgers could do. He knew he didn't want to get Rodgers killed because Mac was out there just destroying everybody in the first half.
Right.
So he's calling a lot of these short passes, quick drops, and getting Rodgers into rhythm. And the few times that he's done that this season has been when the Packers offenses look good. Rodgers looked like that on the first drive of last week's game against Atlanta. But those types of drives and that almost philosophy on offense just hasn't been there all season long. And I think that more than anything is what has led to the struggles that the Packers offense has gone through this year and eventually to Mike McCarthy's fate.
Well, we'll work our way to Mike McCarthy's fate, because the first month of the season was nothing if not interesting for you guys. You have this great comeback in the second half, week one, after it looked like you were going to get literally, Evan, it was the biggest eating crow moment I've ever had on this show, because I do these knee-jerk reaction. I record these little 1 to 2 minute segments after each quarter, and my second quarter knee-jerk reaction to that game was me laughing for about the first 15 or 20 seconds, not because I was maniacally enjoying everything that had happened, which I did in the first half, but it was because I heard the Packers getting booed in Lambeau as they walked off the field at halftime. I could not believe my ears. This is actually happening. This first half could not have gone any better than it actually did. Khalil Mack, who we literally pulled off the street 8 days ago, was an animal in the first half, including a pick six for a touchdown. Your best offensive drive, Mack literally tears the ball out of Deshaun Kaiser's hands, and takes it away from him, ruining that drive, ending that drive. I mean, nothing could have gone better than it did in that first half. And then the second half comes the way it did, and you hear me in the third quarter, it's 21-3 or 20-3, it's whatever, blah blah blah. And then the fourth quarter, it's like, I'm looking for bullets. I can't believe this happened, and mostly because A, Rodgers did it to us again, but B, Collinsworth and Michaels made it sound like I'm gonna stop talking about it because it makes me nuts whenever I think about it. It just. It was awesome what he did. There's no denying that, none whatsoever. I wouldn't sit here and try to take anything away from Rodgers, but they tried to make it sound mythical what he did. It's like a football player playing hurt. I mean, that sounds crazy, doesn't it? So, but you fast forward a week later, you got Minnesota at home. You're going this back and forth battle, which is what everyone was expecting from these two teams, and. Was it in overtime or at the end of regulation that the Clay Matthews moment happened?
That was down near the end of regulation with Minnesota still down a touchdown.
Right.
So
that saved the game for them.
Yeah, it kept that drive alive because the play where Matthews gets flagged, Cousins just heaves one up and Jair Alexander comes down with the ball for an interception.
Right, it was an interception. That's right.
Okay. Ending the game. Or at least it would have ended the game if that play happened after like week 5 or whatever it was that they realized, oh God, we've gone overboard with this body weight rule. I still see visions of whichever referee that was Tony Carenti or somebody throwing that flag. It was Tony Carenti throwing that flag on that hit like in my nightmares. It just and then the kicking. The kicking game, the rest of the fourth quarter in overtime was just hilarious. few things I think make me laugh harder than the continued inability of Vikings kickers to make big field goals in clutch situations. So that was at least fun. But yeah, man, damn, that game was one that the Packers absolutely should have had. And if they had that one, they're sitting even with the Vikings right now in the standings at what, 6-6 or 6-7 or 6-7 or something.
You'd be
we'd be 6-7, and Minnesota would be 6-7.
Right.
So I mean that could be a whole different thing. But that damn game, man, and both teams legitimately have reasons to say we should have won that game and we should have lost that game.
Right. That's the fun. That's the fun with ties, isn't it? It's like,
the one that I always just come back to though is it's that play with Matthews where with the bogus flag that should have sealed the deal, and obviously didn't.
And then it goes bananas one more time against Washington. It's like, not for nothing, but it's like Clay Matthews is not my favorite person, but he's getting screwed week in and week out on this thing. I mean, it was getting comical after a while. I didn't blame, and I'm so glad the NFL didn't fine him for the things that he was saying, because he wasn't wrong when he was talking about how ridiculous it was getting out there. It's like, well, you just put flags on these guys or something. I mean, Jesus Christ, what are we supposed to do?
No, and he got flagged against the Bears, and that one was legit. I mean, he hit Trubisky late, well after he had gotten rid of the football, so that one was fine. But yeah, those back-to-back in weeks 2 and 3, neither one of those was there any excuse for throwing that flag. That is as textbook a clean tackle as you can possibly get.
That Washington hit, I swear to God, when that ref, because he knew, he was like, I don't think he knew the hit was vicious. I just think he knew a flag was coming, and I swear I thought he was going to take his helmet off and beat the referee to death with it when he threw the flag. Like, what the hell am I supposed to do? Jesus Christ. I mean, it was getting so out of hand. At one point, the Dolphins lost the guy for the year because he blew out an ACL trying to ease up on tackling, like I think it was Derek Carr or something from the Raiders. Like, he was trying to go easy on the guy and blew out an ACL trying to do it. And it was like, after that, it's like, all right, what are we supposed to do? The defenders are hurting themselves by not trying to play football on this one. I mean, that's what I used to get told all the time, even when I played in my high school days. It's like, you go full speed all the time, because anytime you're trying not to get hurt, that's when you're going to get hurt. You'll do something, you'll take an odd step, and it will go sideways on you.
Or else, it completely ruins the game, because there was another one instance in that Minnesota game where I think it was towards the end of that game after Matthews got flagged, where Mike Daniels had Cousins essentially wrapped up, and he lets him go because he thinks that Cousins has thrown the football away or something, but Cousins still had it, and so he just he lets him go, and he runs around and he picks up like 6 yards and gets a first down or something. Like it just I'm glad that they reevaluated the emphasis, but it never should have come to that, and it absolutely cost teams wins in those first couple of weeks of the season, and the Packers being one of those teams. Yeah,
and cost a few teams players on top of that as well. I mean, I'm glad they got that fixed faster than the whole catch rule thing, because it only took us 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 years to figure that out. Dating back to
we
Calvin
haven't
Johnson.
figured it out yet.
No, you're right. They haven't, but
I mean, there was one here in the first drive against Atlanta this past week for the Packers where it looked pretty clear that Jair Alexander had knocked the football out of Julio Jones' hands. They ruled it a catch, and Joe Philbin challenges it, and they stuck with the ruling on the field when it looked pretty clear that ball was coming out. So I make it a point now to never predict on Twitter the result of a review when a catch is involved at this point, because I'm inevitably going to get it wrong.
Yeah, because who can tell these days? I mean, the funny thing is, it's all centralized in one place, and they're still getting it wrong somehow. It's all coming down to essentially one person. They're still getting it wrong somehow, which is the most amazing part. Instead of, like it used to be with everybody had their own dedicated booth in each stadium, it's all going to New York and coming in one place where one person makes the final decision, and yet somehow they can't agree. So it's kind of ridiculous. But Anyway, getting back on track, after Washington, you get a win over Buffalo, a shutout win, where Rodgers comes out and slams the offense. It may be the worst that we played all year in a victory, or the worst that we played on offense in a long time. Our defense was awesome for us, and yet we only got him 22 points or whatever he was saying there. Then you had the Mason Crosby game in Detroit. I mean, we feel your pain. A few weeks later, we did the exact same thing against Detroit. We did it outdoors in Soldier Field, but nonetheless, we were fortunate enough that those points didn't cost us a victory like it did for you guys. And then just before your bye week, you had San Francisco in a game that I thought was going to be an easy one for you, but literally had to battle it down to the wire to win that one against San Francisco before the bye. And then after that, you lose 5 out of 6 and then fire Mike McCarthy after the Arizona game. So, yeah, I mean, it's been, I mean, up and down. I don't even think would scratch the surface as to what this year has been like for you guys.
No, and you mentioned that stretch after the bye week. We all knew that was going to be the tough stretch of the season. At Rams, at Patriots, home for the Dolphins, then at Seattle on Thursday, and at Minnesota. Like that, you go in knowing that that's your season right there, and you can't go 1-4 in that stretch and hope to still be a contending team. But it's the way that they lost some of those games that was so frustrating. I mean, they took the Rams down to the wire.
Yeah.
I mean, and losing that game the way they did on the Ty Montgomery bonehead decision to come out of the end zone, which in and of itself was a terrible decision.
And he
but
fumbles
then
the ball.
But then the result of it, with fumbling and losing the football afterwards, I mean that makes it that much more inexcusable. And I think with the trade deadline being 2 days later, it was inevitable that he was going to either find a new place of employment or be out on the street within those next couple days. Yeah. So, I mean, that one was maddening. And then, the next week you're in New England and you're in a tie game early in the fourth quarter, and then, Aaron Jones with an unfortunate fumble, and then everything spirals out of control from there. The big difference between those two situations was, Montgomery doubled down and basically said, well, I thought I could make a play, and it was a good decision. Whereas Aaron Jones was basically like, yeah, I screwed up, and I'm going to work my ass off to make sure it never happens again.
Right.
That's a big reason why you saw everybody turn on Montgomery the way they did, and not, and still maintain faith in Aaron Jones. And certainly that faith has been rewarded, because he looks like, every bit the multi-talented feature back type of guy that is so popular in the NFL these days. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's the way they're losing those games. The Seattle game, where it basically felt like, a redux of the 2014 NFC Championship, where McCarthy's settling for short field goals early. He's playing too conservatively, makes a weird fourth down decision, and then you blow it late. So it's not so much that they lost those games. It's the way they lost those games, and it's the same types of things that we've seen in some of these playoff losses from this team, just rearing their ugly heads again in the span of a few weeks. And then it all obviously comes to a head against the Cardinals. Yeah. You can't lose to the 2-9 Cardinals
at home,
who play in Arizona in a dome in the desert. You can't lose to them at Lambeau Field in December. It's just it absolutely was the straw that broke the camel's back on McCarthy, and it should have been. But the funny part was, I told one of my other writers right after the game, I said, I think there's a 99.9% chance that McCarthy still ends up playing out the season, but I got to get an article ready just in case they decide to fire him tomorrow. And he texts me an hour later and he says, publish that damn thing right now. They just did it.
Yeah, they fired him that afternoon.
That night. Yeah. I was amazed. I was completely flabbergasted that they actually did it. I didn't think for a second that they were going to do it mid-season. But I think it was time. And you could see the writing on the wall, in that whole 5-game stretch. And then finally, again, it just came to a head, and you can't lose a game like that under any circumstances.
Yeah, especially when it's getting down to the wire. You've painted yourself in such a corner that
Yep.
you're in basically playoff mode going into that Arizona game, and that's where Rodgers made one of his we're going to get out of this hole decrees that he's made over the years. Only this one didn't work out immediately. It was like, we'll beat Arizona, we'll beat Atlanta, then go to Chicago where we've had some success. That's on the bulletin board, and you know that. But detailing what it's going to take in order to make a run, and in the past this has worked out. 4-6 a couple years ago, you go 10-6, you make it to the NFC Championship game, kind of thing, and the whole RELAX speech and whatnot on a 1-2 start, and you guys go ripping through the league after that. Only there was no magic this time, and the Arizona game, it's just I didn't really get to see any of that game. I just was stunned at the fact that Arizona was still in it, still hanging with you guys, and then at the end, it's like, did Arizona win that game?
Yeah.
Holy Christ. And then before the Bear game is even over, McCarthy's been fired.
Yeah, there was actually, it was funny. Somebody tweeted today, there was a dropped pick by Eddie Pleasant, a safety who the Packers had picked up off the waiver wire earlier that week because they've been hit so hard with injuries in the back end. He drops a pick in the fourth quarter, and somebody tweeted today, does Mike McCarthy still have a job if this street free agent safety who came in 4 days before the game actually holds on to this football and they win that game? The answer is probably yes.
Yeah.
He probably still gets fired after the season anyway, so I don't think it makes ends up making a difference in the long run as to what the team was going to do. But that was it was just an abysmal effort from that team in every facet of the game, and it again, just inexcusable is the only word to describe that game.
So we've talked a bit about the shortcomings, McCarthy's magic, if you will. I mean, it is not working out the way that it would, or the way that it has in the past. It may be somewhat of a gambler in the past, and things have always kind of come up aces for him before, but it's just everything's kind of gone against him this year, whether it be, bad luck in the form of Clay Matthews getting flagged for a penalty that shouldn't be, and it end up costing you a win or a loss in that Minnesota game. Then it just one after another, things not going right. The Mason Crosby game in Detroit, and the Ty Montgomery thing with the Rams. You should have been the first team to beat them, and you come up short there. The Seattle game, and obviously then with Arizona. What you talked about injuries in the secondary. Is that something that's plaguing the team as a whole? Because I know that I've heard more than once about what you guys are putting up front in the offensive line and how it's having trouble protecting Rodgers from time to time. So kind of detail with me, if you like, about what's, aside from McCarthy not being McCarthy, this year and probably in past years, if you want to really get down to it. But what else has been going wrong for the Packers that they haven't been able to weather the storm like they usually have?
Yeah, I mean, injuries definitely have played a big part. I'll be very curious to see how the adjusted games lost numbers from Football Outsiders come out by the end of after this year, because I bet you any money the Packers are going to be right at the top of this list this year. They lost Jake Ryan, one of the linebackers, in the preseason. Muhammad Wilkerson broke his foot in week 5. Mike Daniels is now on IR. Kenny Clark didn't practice today, so that's going to be great. If something happens where he can't play on Sunday, we're going to have none of our week 1 starters on the defensive line. On Sunday against Atlanta, we had to start 3 backups on the offensive line because both our guards and Brian Bulaga on the right side were all out. Randall Cobb has been hurt for much of the season. Geronimo Allison's on IR. We've had a revolving door of corners. I can go on, and it's been every position group that's been affected except for maybe the running backs. And knock on wood that nothing happens to Aaron Jones, because if I curse him, I'm going to never hear the end of that one.
Right.
But so that's been making Mike Pettine's job on defense, obviously much more difficult. When he's cycling through all these defensive backs, and defensive linemen. As far as Rodgers and the offense go, though, I think a huge part of it that people aren't necessarily realizing unless they're following the team closely is that I think Rodgers' mechanics need to be rebuilt a little bit. I think the knee injury early on in the season really affected his ability to step into his throws and to throw with good throwing mechanics. And he's the kind of guy who he doesn't need to, because his arm is so good that that he can make throws from ridiculous body positions and from all sorts of platforms. But the question is, if you can just take a straight drop back, step into your throw, deliver it accurately and on time, as opposed to having to you run around and play sandlot football, why wouldn't you? It's like, all right, well, if I got a high def station and a standard def station, why in the hell would I ever play, what would I ever put it on in standard def anymore? Right. That's the best comparison I can think of. So it just seems like I can't recall the last time, aside from maybe that first drive again against Atlanta, where he was getting the ball out quick and on time. Most of the season his mechanics have just looked off, and he pulls out some of these crazy throws. There's a throw to Robert Tonyan in the Seattle game that was just completely bonkers, like a 55-yard touchdown that he puts on a dime, while he's rolling to his right and is practically airborne as he's throwing the football. But then for every one of those, there's 2 or 3 third down passes where he's backing up, or he's floating away from the line of scrimmage, and he just kind of chucks something up, and it's off target, or it's out of bounds or something. So I think his mechanics are a big part of the issue, and it's a big part of why the offense isn't clicking the way it normally does. And I think then McCarthy not adjusting to that and not forcing Rodgers into the types of safer, more comfortable throws, more, again, quick drops, quick rhythm passing. He did it in the second half of that game against the Bears, but then it disappeared for most of the rest of the season, and just not being able to adjust, I think, was what did McCarthy in.
This is going to kill you to hear me say that, but to hear you talk about the issues that Rodgers has been having with his mechanics and how he's trying to muscle throws out there is because he has a great arm. I'm seeing Jay Cutler in my head when you say things like that, and I know that makes every Packer fan just want to slash their own wrists here.
Well,
Aaron Rodgers compared to Jay Cutler, but
I'll stop you right there, because Rodgers did just set the record for most consecutive pass attempts without an interception.
Well, there you go.
So
okay, well,
at least he's not throwing picks,
right?
Although he has had a couple dropped in that stretch, but still.
But I mean, that's what that sounded like to me. It's like we used to talk about it all the time as Bear fans, mostly because the offensive line that was blocking for him was terrible. He was constantly throwing off his back foot. Because somebody was going to come, there would be no legs in his throw. He would just muscle it out. It was all arms and shoulders and everything. He wouldn't even really put his hips into it, but he had such a big arm, he'd be able to muscle it out there, and most of the time it would sail or land in the hands of Charles Woodson for a pick six or something like that. But that's what I was having visions of when you were describing the lack of fundamentals in Rodgers' throw, or his throws throughout the season. And because Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, he can do stuff like that and get away with it as far as longest with no interceptions, or most attempts with no interceptions kind of thing. And obviously that did not happen with Jay Cutler. If it had, he might still be on the team, but that's neither here nor there at this point. So Joe Philbin, he's your interim guy. Is he the guy? I mean, is he auditioning for the job? Are you just getting through the season, or what's the future like? I mean, I've heard Josh McDaniels, I've heard Lincoln Riley, and I think you're a Lincoln Riley guy because your Twitter handle is like, I love Lincoln Riley or something like that right now.
So no, I don't think Joe Philbin's going to be a legitimate candidate for the job when the real job search heats up. I think the reason that he has the interim job is because he's done it in Miami for a couple of years. Mike Pettin probably didn't want it because Pettin's even said that he doesn't want to be a head coach again. He'd rather be a stick at the coordinator position, and just kind of Philbin's familiarity with the offense and whatnot. I think that made him the better choice for the rest of the season. But no, I don't look at him as being a real serious candidate when all is said and done. I am a Lincoln Riley fan, as you said. My Twitter header says so. I would love to see somebody bring the type of creative, quick hitting, little bit of spread concepts to this offense. And Rodgers has even kind of hinted that he and some of his teammates kind of want to have a little bit of that. It seemed that was most of these things are things that McCarthy stubbornly would avoid incorporating into the offense. Like, we didn't even see jet sweep action, let alone actually handing off a football on a jet sweep until like week 11 this year. Like, I'm pretty sure that was the first time we saw it all season long. There's things like the creative motions that a lot of these teams are using. I mean, look at Andy Reid. And Andy Reid's situation in Philly, I think, is a great comparison to McCarthy in Green Bay. At some point, he wasn't the right fit anymore. His message had kind of run out, and he needed to change the scenery. And now that he's in Kansas City and he's incorporating so much of these new offensive concepts that he's pulling from college football. Obviously, he's got a ridiculous young quarterback in Pat Mahomes, but he's really having a lot of success there. And I think McCarthy could do the same if he ends up as a head coach someplace else in the future. But as far as what the Packers need right now, I think whether it's a head coach or an offensive coordinator, they need somebody a little bit on the younger side who's not afraid to get creative with this offense, because McCarthy's offense was cutting edge in the first few years that he was in Green Bay. And I mean, they went 15-1 in 2011 with that offense that was completely unstoppable most of that season after winning the Super Bowl. And then in 2012, teams started to figure it out, and he just never really adjusted. So seeing those types of things would be exciting. And I don't know if a guy like DiFilippo was the guy. I mean, he was even mentioned as a possible head coach candidate until this last week, and he just got fired in Minnesota.
Right.
But again, a guy like Riley, I think could be that guy. McDaniels, I think, could work as long as he and Rodgers can find a way to work together. And I mean, let's face it, McDaniels has worked with Tom Brady for most of his career, so he knows how to deal with quarterbacks who have an ego. Right. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Rodgers doesn't have an ego, because he absolutely does. He's a cocky dude. He knows how good he is, for sure. And I think that relationship between him and the head coach is going to be important. I don't think it's necessarily going to be the most important thing in the head coach, but it's going to be an important factor.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on when the season ends and taking over the job, because you guys still have a pretty decent team. You're definitely in a transition. That's for sure. But you still have Aaron Rodgers and plenty of weapons and such for him to throw the football to. You have this young emerging running back in Aaron Jones, and Mike Pettin is one of the better defensive coordinators in football. There's a lot to work with there, so it's not like you got to come in and try to rebuild the team from 3-13 to supremacy again. You've got a lot to build on, and definitely enough to work around and get back to the playoffs like next year if you can avoid the injury problems and whatnot. So it's probably one of the more enticing jobs out there, one would think. And, not that Green Bay, Wisconsin is all that exciting to be in, but is there a better place to be a football coach than in Green Bay, Wisconsin? I mean, the Bears and the Packers and, the best fan bases in football, and who wouldn't want to coach every day in Lambeau Field?
Absolutely. And the structure of the organization is set up that longevity is possible. I mean, McCarthy was there for 13 years. or all just shy of 13 seasons.
Right.
I mean, Holmgren basically was going to be there until he wanted to leave, in the 90s, and so from that perspective, you've got the stability there. You don't have a meddling owner who's got his fingers kind of in everything. You've also got, like you said, there's the top end talent on this team. I think is great. It's the middle and bottom end of the roster where there's issues, but the beauty of it is the Packers have a ton of draft capital this next year. You got 2 first-round picks because you picked up that one from New Orleans on draft day last year. You've got an extra 4th rounder that you get picked up for Clinton Dix, which doesn't that look like a great trade right now?
Yeah, it does.
We tried to tell Washington fans that he wasn't very good, and they didn't listen, and now they know. So take that, Washington fans. But the fact that we got a 4th-round pick for him in next year's draft now looks like a complete steal. And you've got a GM now in Brian Gutekunst who looks like he's willing to spend money in free agency, whereas you didn't have that before in Ted Thompson. I think the Packers are going to be major players this year in free agency, in part because one of the things that Thompson always was on the lookout for was those compensatory picks. He always wanted to have a net loss of big name free agents, and so he'd pick up those comp picks the next year. And I think for two reasons, Goot probably doesn't worry about those as much. But also this year, Packers just don't have that many high-priced free agents who are likely to sign big deals. So at this point, you're not likely to get any anyway. So you might as well go out and sign some of these guys because you're going to be in the negative anyhow. So there's a lot of reasons, I think. And again, you got Aaron Rodgers. That's the biggest one. But lots of reasons why this would be an intriguing job for anybody looking to move up into a head coaching role.
So let's rein it back in to talk about this game on Sunday, and it's weird, even from my perspective, that we're in the spot that we're in right now, because the roles that each team is going to play on Sunday are usually the roles that the other team is playing. Yep. The Bears are headed towards the playoffs. Unless something catastrophic happens, that's exactly where we're going. And the Packers are in a position where they're in desperation mode, trying to save their season. It's possible. Mathematically, it's still possible. But for the most part, you're out to spoil what's happening with the Bears, as opposed to that's what the Bears are pretty much done for the year, and we're just trying to ruin your chances at home field advantage or try to take the bye week away from you or something like that when we play this late in the season like we usually do. And instead, it's the Packers who are out to play spoiler to the Bears, trying to keep pace with the Rams and the Saints to try to get a bye week of their own. If we win on Sunday, we clinch the division. I know you guys are all about ruining that. So, it's weird that the roles are reversed, in this situation for it to happen as quickly as it did.
Yeah, well, and we talked about it early, in the off season, that we both kind of figured the Bears were another year away from really being serious contenders. Yeah. And obviously that was before the Mac trade, and that kind of threw a wrench into things. And he's been better. I'll say it. He's been better in Chicago than I thought he would, than I thought he would be. But I think that speaks to the play of that defense. Really speaks to just how good a coach Vic Fangio is. I think he's getting a lot of credit for it, but I think probably not even as much as he deserves, because the play of that Bears defense has just been unreal this year.
Yeah, after the way he shut down LA on Sunday, that credit is coming now, because he did what literally no one else was able to do. I mean, the one team that had beaten the Rams had to outscore them. It didn't stop them or slow them down. You had to outscore them 45-35. And Trubisky threw for 110 yards and 3 picks on Sunday, and we still destroyed the Rams. It was unbelievable what the defense was doing on Sunday night.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if there is a playoff rematch of that game. And in all likelihood, it probably would happen in LA.
Yeah. For sure.
If the venue and the weather would play a different role.
There's always an advantage.
I don't know.
there's always an advantage in those rematch games, especially for the team that lost, I feel. Number one, we're going to be playing the game on their turf, and number two, they know what not to do this time.
Yeah.
Because they failed miserably. Aaron Donald was a complete non-factor in the game, and the Bears were suffocating Goff. He dropped back for 44 passes. He was either pressured or hit on 18 of them. So nearly half the time that he went back for a pass, somebody was in his face or on top of him. So, Sean McVay is going to work double time to make sure that that's not even remotely close to what happens if there is a rematch in the postseason.
Yep.
So
yeah, but I guess getting back to Sunday, I think the key for the Packers, again, it's going to be come out and get the ball out of Rodgers' hands quickly. And I think one of the reasons they did that against Atlanta was because that offensive line was so banged up that Philbin kind of scripted it that way to make sure that he took a little bit of pressure off of those guys early on, especially because Atlanta does have some pretty decent pass rushers. They haven't been getting home a whole lot this year, but there's plenty of talent there.
Yeah, for sure.
And obviously they're not the group that Chicago has, but I would expect to see more of the same this week, and just especially because now it's looking like Balaga's probably not going to play, so we're going to see a lot of Jason Spriggs against Khalil Mack, which.
Oh boy.
Yeah, exactly. So at that point, you're protecting your line, you're protecting Rodgers too by giving him quicker developing routes and tailoring the offense to that style of passing game rather than the longer developing routes that we typically saw from McCarthy.
Well, when I was talking to your guys for the ACME podcast yesterday, they were asking me, what do the Bears need to do to win on Sunday? And I was like, you know what, man, I'm trying to be funny here. Not trying to be funny. I don't know. Okay. Because it's the Packers. And how many times have it been like, well, the Packers couldn't run to save their lives, and then Ty Montgomery runs for 200 yards on us. The offensive line is made of Swiss cheese. There are 4 guys that were all packing groceries the other day that are going to be starting for Aaron Rodgers, and then we don't lay a finger on them the entire football game. The defense can't stop. They're a swinging gate. They gave up the 150 yards rushing last week. The Bears rush for less than 100. I mean, it just seems like whatever's not working with Green Bay finds its way to working when they play the Bears. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about X's and O's, this and that, or whatever. I'm going to go with what I said last week, which I nailed the prediction as far as what I thought the win was going to come down to against the Bears and the Rams last week. And that is, if the Packers want to win on Sunday, they have to limit their mistakes. They can't turn the football over. And, we already know that's not going to be much of an issue with Rodgers with interceptions or anything like that. But avoiding the mistakes as much as possible so that they're playing the Bears straight up as opposed to trying to, recover from this mistake or that one, this bad call, this missed tackle, this blown coverage, that kind of thing. They have to limit the mistakes if they're going to beat the Bears on Sunday. We have been playing lights out at home. The crowd has been way into the last couple of games. The Sunday night games against the Rams and the Vikings, the crowd was an absolute factor in both games. I don't care what anybody says. And every Bear fan on the planet wants this game bad, okay, including myself, obviously. I mean, forget about Collinsworth and Michael's basically making it this like this is my, this is the rock that I'm building my foundation on. We win this game or I'm running out into traffic afterwards, but we all want this one back because in the NFL, when you lose a game, in most instances, you don't get a chance to right that wrong. We don't get to play New England again or Miami or the Giants this year, but we do get a second crack at Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, and they're coming into town. They're going to be in Chicago this time where we're 6-1 this year. I don't know if John Fox had 6 home wins in the entire 3 years he was in Chicago. Nagy's got 6 already, So, he's defying everything that, like he's making it look easy what John Fox made look so difficult. So if Green Bay is going to win the game on Sunday, it's going to be because they made close to no mistakes in the game or found a way to force the Bears to make more.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there that you mentioned 6-1 at home. The Packers are 0-6 on the road this year.
That's right. What is about? I
Yeah.
was going to ask, like, what's the deal with road games
No
this
clue.
year, man? I mean, that used to be a thing. Like the Packers come to town, it's like, oh crap, man. There's our one home loss for the year or something like that. They're 0-6 on the road this year.
Yeah. So they've been snake bit, but I mean, you mentioned mistakes. I think the one thing that I'll be looking at is third downs.
Okay.
Last week was the second time all season that the Packers have been 50% or better on third down. They're sitting in the bottom 10 teams in the league, I think, in third down conversion rate on offense, and so that's really been the Achilles heel of this offense all year long, especially since the bye week. So if they can actually find a way to convert some third downs, that's going to go a long way to giving them a shot to win this game. I think you're absolutely right about the mistakes and the turnovers. I'm looking at it, and this defense is nuts. They've turned the ball over 3 times or more in 8 games this season. That doesn't happen in the NFL anymore.
Right.
So yeah, I mean they're again. Thankfully, Rodgers controls the football. He's going to throw it away before he's going to throw it into a dangerous area in most instances. So I think in that area you're set up well from your quarterback to avoid the turnovers. But so from that perspective, to me, it's going to come down to, can the Packers be remotely effective on third down on offense? If so, they've got a shot.
Yeah, I mean, it's when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, it'll like I don't remember the circumstances of the one that Kyle Fuller dropped. I mean, it hit him right in the chest with the ball, which is just devastating to think about. That was the game right there. If he intercepts it, the game is over and we win. But if the Bears pick off Aaron Rodgers, it's not going to be because he let one sail or he threw to someone who did. He always seems to be able to know what his receivers are doing. So I've never really I don't think I've ever seen an interception from Rodgers where it's like, well, Randall Cobb went left and he threw it right and the DB was standing right there. I don't think I've ever seen that from Aaron Rodgers. So if the Bears are picking off Aaron Rodgers, they're making plays on the football, which is something that Eddie Jackson has been fantastic about this year.
Yep.
Kyle Fuller made a great play that erased Mitch Trubisky's interception in the third quarter. Trubisky threw an interception on the very next play. Kyle Fuller picks off Jared Goff to get the ball back. I think that if the Bears are picking off Rodgers, that's how it's happening. Mukamura made a move on somebody, or somebody jumped a route and got in front of it, that kind of thing. So I think if the Bears are able to force some interceptions out of Rodgers, that's probably how it's going to happen, because he's too smart and he's too good to be like, well, what the hell was Rodgers thinking on that one? I don't think I've ever said that in all the games that I've watched Green Bay play, and I'm not trying to blow smoke. I mean, that's legit. I've watched many Packer games, because I always seem to get the Packer game when the Bears are playing late or on Monday night or something like that. I always get the Packer game, so I watch a lot of Packer games, and I don't think I've ever heard one announcer ever say that ever about Aaron Rodgers. Like, man, what a stupid throw from Aaron Rodgers. I mean, what the hell was he thinking there? I don't think I've ever seen it happen one time, which is maddening, to be honest with you. That as long as we've been watching that guy play, I haven't, heard anyone talk about him that way. But, I mean, you're right. What the defense is doing this year is crazy. I saw a picture on Twitter. It was a stat. It was 3 years under John Fox, literally 8 interceptions apiece in those 3 years. We have 26 this year alone. So we have more in this season than 3 years of John Fox, who is a defensive mind you.
Yep.
Combined in 3 years, we still have more than the defense was able to pull off under John Fox, and it's remarkable what they've been able to do this year. So I mean, I'm chomping at the bit to see what we can do this Sunday against Green Bay. So, how do you think it's going to go down on Sunday? I'm interested to hear this.
Yeah, I don't see Green Bay winning this game. I'll put it out there.
Okay.
That defense, the third. I come back to third downs. And Chicago's defense is great on third down. I think they're sitting third in the league in third down percentage against. And for whatever reason, even if the Packers can get a running game going, it seems like even on some of these 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 3s, the convertible down in distances, they just seem to kind of break down. And again, thankfully that changed a little bit last week, but there wasn't really anything tangible to point to say, all right, this is why that changed. It's not like they were really doing a whole lot of different stuff schematically with Philbin calling the plays instead of McCarthy. That didn't really change. I think it's just, they executed a couple times when they hadn't before. And so you can get away with that against one of the worst defenses in the league. I don't see the Packers rattling off 34 points in a row against the best defense in the NFL. Right. And so with the mixing and matching that Mike Pettine's got to do on the back end, I struggle to see this game being more than like a 20-16 or a 21-17 game. I don't think you're definitely not going to see a lot of points as far as I'm concerned. Sure. Just again, because I think the Packers can at least limit Trubisky and that Bears offense. But it's going to be a matter of, like you said, who's going to make a critical mistake? Can Pettine maybe force the Bears into a 3rd and long, and then that's when he brings the pressure and he forces a bad throw out of Trubisky? That could turn it, but I do think there's going to be a big play somewhere along the line that kind of defines the end result. And the Packers have been on the wrong end of too many of those this year for me to really feel like they're gonna pull one off against a team like Chicago this year.
Welcome to my world, my friend. Now you know what it feels like to be a Bear fan.
Yeah.
Like I know that we can beat this team. I know that we're good enough. It's just that every now and then we make a mistake. I mean, I was thinking about the 2016 game. It was week 15, week 16. And it was that game where the Packers got way out in front, like 28-7 or something like that. And then the awesome Matt Barkley brings us all the way back. We tie up the football game. All we have to do is – and the Packers really weren't – and this is what drove me nuts, was that the Bears were playing not to lose. They went for the extra point after they got the comeback instead of going for 2 to try to take the lead and just win the game because it doesn't affect our season one way or the other. And instead – Rodgers and McCarthy come
Rodgers
out.
To Nelson.
Rodgers to Jordy Nelson about 70 yards downfield, and just like that, you're in field goal range. You kick the field goal, it's over, and you win. And it's like that's what happens. Even when we're doing something miraculous ourselves, Rodgers finds a way to one-up us. And, those are the kinds of things that I think about when it comes to Green Bay and Chicago. And this season being so unique as far as history is concerned, that, clearly the Bears are the better team coming into the game this time around, which is odd and all on its own. But I think I feel oddly like I did last week with the Rams. I either thought it was going to be a close game coming down to the wire, maybe a one-score outcome, or I thought the Rams were going to kill us because, whatever we were going to try to do against the Rams wasn't going to work and they were going to light us up. That's what I thought was going to happen. And that's kind of how I feel about this game on Sunday. I'm leaning 90-10 towards a closer outcome, one-score game, that kind of thing. But, it wouldn't actually surprise me that much with the way our defense is playing and the hot and cold that is Mitch Trubisky to come out and throw for 4 touchdowns in the first half or something like that. It wouldn't completely blow me away if something like that happened. I don't think that it will. I think we're going to have more of a close, like you said, 21-16, 20-13, that kind of football game. That's what I'm leaning more towards on Sunday. But it wouldn't really surprise me all that much if we heard this was a bounce back game for Mitch and he and the offense got back on track, whereas they were lucky that our defense showed up on Sunday against the Rams.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting to see how this secondary for the Packers, really the defense as a whole. I mean, it's been really banged up this year, and if Kenny Clark cannot play, that's a huge loss. I can't overstate how big that would be.
What's ailing him?
If he's not able to. What's that?
What's ailing him?
He just popped up. I think it's an elbow issue. He went out for a couple plays last week. He came back in. I think he finished out the game, but he didn't practice today. So I'm hoping maybe they just gave him a day off. We'll have to keep an eye on that, as the week goes on. But I mean, even if he does play, the secondary is still banged up. It's very young. Jair Alexander looks like he's going to be a stud. But you got Josh Jackson from Iowa, who he just doesn't really understand how to play man coverage yet. And Pettin loves to play press man, and it's just not a great fit yet. And so he's been challenged to the point where the Packers have been playing Tony Brown, an undrafted rookie from Alabama, ahead of him in certain situations this year.
Wow.
So, that's going to be, I think, pretty telling. Is if there's any breakdowns in the secondary, that's going to spell some trouble, because again, it's a young group. They're full of talent, but they're, especially in Jackson's case, they're just not quite up to the technique.
Yeah, they're green
yet to where they need to be. Exactly. So there's definitely opportunities to exploit the secondary in the passing game. It's make sure you don't get into those third and longs, because that's when Pettin dials up the pressure, and he can really hurt you with some of his really interesting blitz packages.
Well, there you have it. There's your rundown from myself and Evan Western on the Week 15 matchup between the Bears and Evan. I would be lying if I didn't say that I was enjoying this. And it's more so because Rodgers is still playing. When you guys were out without him for 7-8 weeks last year, I didn't enjoy watching them go down the way they did last year. Only finished, it was 8-8 last year, right? 8-8 or 7-9?
7-9.
7-9,
yeah.
Right. But you spent most of those games without Rodgers last year. It wasn't fun watching that. I mean, it's more so that A, we're having a great year, and B, the Packers are kind of flailing, and Rodgers is playing not exactly 100% healthy, because who knows where that knee is at right now. But nonetheless, it's. But I'm not a gloating kind of guy, even though that sounds exactly like what I'm doing right now. It's more so just that I'm happy to see things going my way for once, as opposed to a quarter century of watching it go Green Bay's way almost every single time. So, I'm interested to see what's going to happen with Green Bay in the offseason, who the next coach is going to be, and who's interested in the job, and who you guys pick up along the way to kind of fill in some of these fill up some of these holes in what you guys do in the draft. I'm very interested. I'm definitely going to be keeping a keen eye on Green Bay to see how much of a threat you guys are going to be to what we hope is a glorious season for the Bears in 2019. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting, and I know that you'll be back to help us filter our way through it.
You know it. I look forward to it, and like you said, next time we talk, I'm sure there will be no shortage of discussion topics, and like I said, it'll be just real interesting to see where this coaching search goes. I haven't covered this team when they've been going through a coaching search. Did a little bit with a GM last year, but this is uncharted territory for me personally covering this team. So it should be an interesting next several weeks.
Well, I root for the Packers to come back, because it won't be the same, because we really haven't had a period. We've had a couple years here, maybe one there, where the Packers and the Bears were both good at the same time. Yep. It just seems like the universe can't handle both. They either both are bad, or they're both terrible, or one is good and the other is bad. So apparently that's what balances the universe. Is the Bears are having a great year, Green Bay has to be having a crappy one, and vice versa. So I'm rooting for Green Bay to make a quick comeback next year, so that we can have some of those awesome back and forth games, kind of like the finale in 2010, Week 17. The Packers have to win to make the playoffs. It was a 10-3 game, which just by that sounds like the most boring game ever. Instead, it was the most exciting 10-3 football game I've ever seen. So, I mean,
absolutely,
the high-level football between Bears and Packers, that's all I want. I want one of those, in Lambeau, in Chicago. I don't care, but I just want that. I want a victory over Green Bay to mean something, as opposed to in this season. Honestly, if the Bears win on Sunday, it clinches us the division, but it wouldn't be the same as if we had won week 1 when we're both 0-0, and it wouldn't be this. It won't be the same. I want these games to have weight. I want this rivalry to be a true rivalry, and in a sense, it is because it's the oldest in the league. We've got the most games played against each other, and the rivalry between the fans is there for sure. But either you're good or we're good. It's never, we're clashing at the same time like we were able to in 2010 for the NFC Championship. I mean, that was awesome. Bears Packers for the NFC title. That was so much fun. Unfortunately, we didn't win,
the NFL is just better. It would be better when these two teams are both good at the same time, like you said. So
if they're both 9-4 right now, this is a Sunday night football conversation we're having.
Absolutely.
Right now. Those are the games that I want. I want these games like, Bears Packers week 13. Let's flex that to Sunday. I don't give a damn what's on the schedule. Let's get that on there, and stuff like that. So I'm hoping you guys bounce back next year. So that it's a competitive and it's a true rivalry for a change, where we're exchanging wins, not one team is dominating the other. And I'll take a loss every now and then if it means we can get you back on the next one, kind of thing. I just want this to be the rivalry that everybody says it is. I would like for it to actually be that way on the field.
Agreed.
All right, Evan. Appreciate your time, man. Thanks for hanging out. We'll talk to you again real soon. All right.
My pleasure. And hey, go Pack Go.
And I got to let you do it. So that's what I was waiting for. That's what the silence was about. Go ahead and say it. You want to. So, all right.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Yep. Want to thank Evan for coming back on the show, and it's fun when you talk to someone like that, and you guys have heard me say it 1,000 times over the last few years since I started having guests on the show. This is why I do that. Like-minded individuals, even though we share allegiances with different teams and whatnot, our passion is the same. So we're speaking the same language, and that's why I enjoy talking to guys like Evan and Jeremy and Brad Mader from last week and things like that. These, the live and die guys with their teams and everything. It's been a lot of fun having on and getting to know guys like Evan and Chris Gates and Jeremy Reisman over the last few years. So, and also being a level-headed, grounded kind of guy, because he is, a member of the press and he does write, so he does have to have some kind of objectivity when talking about the team. He can also sit back and look at it, and like when we talked about week 1 and how ridiculous Collinsworth and Al Michaels were throughout the game, just overblowing what Rodgers was doing was actually pretty awesome on its own without these two dummies trying to blow it up and make it sound mythical or something like that. So for him to be on board with that instead of just telling me to shut up because I'm a Bear fan with sour grapes or anything like that, it's like, yeah, I get what you're saying, because going back and looking at it, it was kind of ridiculous, some of the things those guys were saying. So anyway, enjoyed having him back on. Look forward to talking to him again shortly. And there's not really a whole much to talk about that he and I did not cover. We talked for over an hour, so I mean, we definitely got a lot out of the conversation and covered enough, including both of us sharing perspective on what we think it's going to take to win the game. And when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, when it comes to the Packers, it's just like I said in the conversation with Evan, all the rules are out. You heard us, Jeremy and Reisman and I would say that about this, that, when these two teams get together, because right now it is the truest rivalry in the division, the Bears and the Lions, because they're the ones that are always having these close down to the wire games, despite the records and so on and so forth. With the Packers, it's basically like I said, and when I say you can throw out the rule book, I mean that in the most negative way possible, because the rules going into the games always seem to change. The Packers can't rush the passer. They sack Jay Cutler 6 times. They can't run the football. Ty Montgomery runs for $180 and 3 touchdowns. The offensive line can't protect Rodgers. We don't lay a finger on him the entire game. So when it comes to the Packers, I'm just going to be like, instead of just saying, let's do this, I'm going to just go back to the old safety net that I sounded like a genius calling last week. Limit the mistakes. Force the mistakes out of Green Bay, limit your own, and it's an important conversation to have right now after the 3 interception performance from Mitch last week. I don't think he's going to do that again. I think he was trying to force throws. He even mentioned himself when talking to the press this week, he was rushing his footwork, so it was a fundamental issue, just like I thought it was. He said it didn't have anything to do with the shoulder. It was more about, trying to rush the throw, getting the ball out, and basically forgetting his fundamentals while doing it, and that allowed the ball to sail and get out of position and fly over his receivers' heads and everything. So he's aware of what he was doing. God bless him. He's aware that he was doing and what he needs to do to fix it. So hopefully he will implement that on Sunday, and his play won't be the issue that it was on Sunday. Even though it turned out to be a non-issue because of the way of our defense was playing, it was an issue nonetheless as far as people rubber stamping the Bears for a trip to Atlanta. Like Louis Riddick is saying, despite Mitch Trubisky, I still believe the Bears are the best team in the NFC. Other teams are saying, yeah, the Bears are great. That defense is awesome, but Trubisky, though, So we get a good game out of Mitch. People might have to change their tune. So we'll see what happens with that. So we want to limit our mistakes. We want to force mistakes out of Green Bay, see if we can't get some interceptions out of Rodgers, force some fumbles out of that Aaron Jones kid, and what have you. And like I said, mistakes can be a missed tackle, blown coverage, holding penalty at the wrong time, things like that. Those are mistakes as well. So the Bears are going to want to keep the scoreboard light on their end of the mistakes side of things. And if they do, then they'll be able to defy the odds that seem to always defy themselves when it comes to the Bears and Packers. Like whatever the Packers can't do, they always seem to be able to do it in spades against the Bears, no matter how good or bad their team is. You heard me list the examples before. We can't run the football. We're averaging 60 points or 60 yards a game combined with 3 running backs, Aaron Rodgers, rushing, scrambling from time to time, and yet they rattle off 250 against us because Ty Montgomery had 200 yards rushing on his own, and Rodgers added another 30 or 40 scrambling for first downs and stuff like that. So it's pointless for me as someone who has sat and watched this rivalry to sit here and be like, okay, well, the Packers might be out without Bulaga this week, so Jason Spriggs, who at one time I wanted more than I wanted Cody Whitehair. Yeah, that's why Ryan Pace has the job and I don't. But apparently he might be out there, and if he's got to go one-on-one with Mac, that could be a long afternoon for him. And other issues that if the other offensive lineman Lane Taylor plays, he probably won't be 100%. And he's going up against the interior guys, Eddie Goldman, Akeem Hicks, and so on. We could take advantage and dominate up front like we did against the Rams, make for a long afternoon and an easy Sunday for our Bears on Sunday. But again, we've had plenty of games where the offensive line of the Packers was playing like garbage and we didn't touch Rodgers the entire football game. So, ignoring all of that, limit the mistakes, stay within yourselves. Do not let the revenge cloud your vision. Go out there and play your game. You are the better team. Go out and handle your business. You will win the game on Sunday. Plain and simple, and I'm going to leave it at that. So that is going to do it for the Week 15 preview of the Bears Talk Underground. Come back on Monday. Will it be another 40-minute profanity-laced tirade like we had with our last Bears-Packers home game when oh, God, I still wake up screaming thinking about that game. We're coming off the bye. We're playing an Aaron Rodgers-less Green Bay Packer team, and we get our asses kicked. I mean, it's just, oh, God, that one sucked so bad. So will it be another 40-minute profanity-laced tirade that I have to put an explicit tag on, or will we be talking about our first division title since 2010? Come back on Monday and find out. So until then, my name is Larry D, and this has been the Bears Talk Underground.